need to raise money, you need to know a little bit of something about securities law. So this is securities law. It is a very long and complicated set of rules that govern the transaction of securities. Thankfully, you don't need to know any of that. There are only 3 things that you need to know about securities law. So first, you need to know what the definition of a security is. Second, you need to know that you can't offer or sell a security without registering it with the government. And third, you need to know that there are actually a few exceptions to what I just said that let you sell a security without registration. So let's go to my first point. What is a security? You create a security when you give someone an opportunity to invest in your business and offer them in return in exchange for them putting money in your business. In other words, you're taking a financial interest in your business in exchange for a return of profits based on your business's performance. Second point, those securities that we just created, you can't offer them willy-nilly. The fundamental rule of securities law is that you cannot offer or sell a security without registering it with the proper regulatory authority, usually the Securities and Exchange Commission. The SEC takes this really seriously, so that if you even ask someone to invest in your business, you could trigger a responsibility to register. The reason why we have these securities laws is to protect investors from really sketchy investments and also to facilitate investments to let people sort of trust in the market, because if they think that what they're investing in is good, they'll be more likely to invest. So, can you guys think of anything that you would do that might create a security when you're trying to raise money?
Personal loan from someone within the co-op to the co-op.
That's a good idea. Any others? Okay. Well, let's go over some of the really common ways that people trigger securities when they're trying to raise money. 1, selling stock in their business. 2, asking people to either invest or loan money to their business. 3, offering a share of your business's profits. And really importantly for all of you guys, since you're interested in worker co-ops, paying for your member capital buy-in. When you join a co-op, you pay a certain membership capital buy-in in exchange for right to the future profits of that co-op. And that should scream to you a security that needs to be registered. So what happens if you created a security that needs to be registered? Well, let's just say registration really sucks.
Yep.
Think paperwork, think expensive lawyers, and think lawsuits. So as a young business, you really don't want to be doing this. So what can you do if you're running into securities law? Well, that brings me to my third point. The government has set up a few exemptions that will help you out and let you offer securities without jumping through a bunch of legal hurdles. And if you go to the manual on pages, I think it's 65 to 67, you can follow along as I talk a little bit about these exemptions. So first up, we have the California Limited Offering Exemption, Section 25102F. There are 4 things you have to do to qualify for the exemption. First, you have to make sure that you are only selling to California people and that you are doing most of your business in California. Second, make sure that when you're offering this security, you're only offering to up to 35 people. Third, make sure that those 35 people, you either have a pre-existing relationship with them or they have the type of financial experience that they can take care of themselves. And lastly, when you're doing this offering, make sure you do not advertise. So no radio ads, nothing on TV, nothing like that. The actual process for using this exemption is pretty easy. You just go online to the California Department of Business Oversight and you fill out an online form that gives California notice that you're using this exemption. Now, what happens if you want to raise money from more than 35 people? Well, we have this thing called an accredited investor, and the government has decided there are certain categories of people who don't need protection from securities laws. So who are these special little snowflakes? First up, really, really rich people. I'm talking really rich. So if you're selling to a rich person, they don't need the protections of securities law. Something that comes up a lot with co-ops is directors and officers. Ooh, I think I included the wrong picture. Not those directors and officers, these ones, the kind of ones that Ricardo was talking about in the corporate governance, the people who are sort of leading and managing a business. For all of you, most of you will be serving as directors or officers of your co-op. So make sure that your co-op uses the accredited investor exemption when they're trying to raise money from you. Now, we talked a lot about consumer co-ops. California actually has a statutory exemption, section 25100, section R, which states that a consumer co-op can use an exemption. So as long as you're only raising $300 from members who are voting members, and you don't use a promoter, which is a person who gets a fee for helping you sell the securities, then you can use this exemption when raising $300 and you don't have to register the security. So, who here has heard of crowdfunding? Yeah, crowdfunding. So, at its base level, crowdfunding is sort of the cooperative networking and pooling of resources from a lot of people, usually through the internet, to raise money and support projects started by other people. So, in recent years, crowdfunding has grown into a really big business, and there are a lot of different types of companies right now that are doing crowdfunding. The thing is, it's a little complicated because some, but not all crowdfunding is covered under securities law. We have companies like Kickstarter and Indiegogo, which you don't even have securities when you're talking about those companies because you're just making a donation. Then you have companies like Kiva where you are lending money, but because you're not expecting a return, it's not going to be considered a covered security. And then finally, you have stuff like Prosper and Lending Club where the lender is expecting interest on top of the money that they're lending, so that is probably going to be a covered security that the SEC is going to want to look into. So we do want to be able to use crowdfunding to raise money. So the government is in the process of putting together an exemption that would let people use crowdfunding to raise money through securities. Under this proposed exemption, a co-op using the Crowdfunding Act would be able to raise up to $1 million a year and raise up to either $2,000 or 5% of a person's net worth or income, depending on which number is bigger. But remember, this exemption does not exist yet, so do not use it. So what happens if you don't have an exemption and you still need to raise money and you're going to run into securities law and you don't want to deal with all that paperwork? Well, has anybody here heard of People's Community Market? Yeah. And for the rest of you who haven't heard of it, do you like ice cream? Because People's Community Market and a little company called Ben & Jerry's both use this thing called a direct public offering to raise money. Now, a direct public offering is sort of a securities transaction, so you are going to have to deal with securities law, and you're definitely going to want to have a lawyer to handle this. But the great thing about a DPO is that it lets you raise money directly from people, and you can advertise your offer. So, to review, if you want to raise money from 35 of your closest friends and family, you should think about using the California Limited Offering. If you want to raise money from directors, officers, managing members of your cooperative, or maybe even Mitt Romney, you should consider using the accredited investor exemption. If you have a consumer co-op and you only need to raise $300 from all of the voting members, then you can use the consumer co-op exemption. In the future, if you want to raise a little bit of money from a lot of different people, you might be able to use the crowdfunding exemption. And if you don't have an exemption, don't forget about DPOs. So, I just spent a lot of time talking about securities laws, which are really important for protecting the interests of outside investors. But wasn't this supposed to be about worker co-ops? Why do we care about outside investors? Well, we care about their money at least. But here's the thing. Outside investors, they're not going to give you money unless they get a little something in return in terms of profits and controls. And this goes up against two of the core principles of a worker co-op. Because under a worker co-op, profits are distributed based on the amount of work that a person puts into the co-op, and control is distributed based on a one member, one vote system. For outside investors, though, they're going to want both profits and controls to be divided up based on how much they invest. So the more money they give you, the more they want, because they're kind of greedy like that. So what do? If you're a co-op, you want their money, but but you don't want to not be a worker co-op, you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. So there are companies like Equal Exchange which have come up with compromises that sort of help maintain co-op principles. Equal Exchange has this program where they've set up certificates of deposits that outside investors can purchase, and they pull the money from those CDs to support their own projects. Now, under those CDs, there's a fixed term and a fixed interest rate, and outside investors who purchase those CDs don't get outside voting rights. So you, as an outside investor, it's a really cool opportunity to support a really cool company. And for Equal Exchange, they get to preserve their control, and the profits that they give to outside investors are limited to just the set interest rate of the CD. It's a win-win for everyone. So, one last final time, what were the 3 things that I wanted you to take away from securities law? 1, I want you to know what a security is, so remember that it's when you offer a return in exchange for someone investing money in your company. 2, I want you to know, and please remember this, do not sell a security without registering it. And 3, if you're going to do that, make sure you have an exemption so that it allows you to avoid the registration process. Please use these exemptions. So, that was securities law. Now that you've heard all about raising money and all about complying with securities law, your co-op will hopefully be really flush with cash. Let's go check out and see what the Green Commonwealth is doing and see how they're doing.